Okay. Goes here. All right. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is in the chat, I'm going to put two links, right? The first link is a video of me mixing a song from start to finish. It's like an acoustic-y, folky song. And the second one is the actual live stream for today's lesson. So you guys pick which one you want to watch. Obviously, if you're new to all this stuff, I do recommend the second one. But, you know, I don't have any control over what you guys are doing right now. So you guys could be even taking a shit in the supermarket for all I care. So it's up to you. And that's a line. Like that's gonna be the line of the mod, I feel. Like it's gonna be the big phrase. All right, so you guys go ahead to that link. Mute yourself on Zoom so that it doesn't interrupt the live stream. If you need to even leave Zoom, because sometimes the YouTube volume is like really soft if you don't leave Zoom. That's fine. Leave Zoom and then come back afterwards if you want. Obviously, you can just leave afterwards. And yeah, let's. I'll see you guys on YouTube. So, test. 1 2 1 2. All right. So if you are here on the YouTube side of things, and if you're here for my live stream, I would really appreciate it if you put your name in the chat, just so that I know who's here and who's listening. So if you could please put your name in the chat and like let me know that you're actually here. Test. Okay. Can you guys hear me? And also make sure that you guys can actually hear me. If you can put in the live stream chat if you can hear me or not, that would be great. Actually, I'm going to make that announcement too. And just real quick, if you are on the live stream, just put your name in the live chat and make sure that you can hear me on that side as well. Thanks. Test. Jorel, thanks, dude. I appreciate it. I assume that you can hear me. If anything happens, just let me know. And
dude, I appreciate it.
What's up, Cam? Thanks, guys, for putting the name in. At least I got 2 people watching. All right, so let's go into some basics of plugins. Now, I already explained to you guys that there's an audio suite version of plugins that you can use in offline mode. So, for example, if you had...
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No.
Right? If you wanted to, you can highlight different regions and then use this offline version of plugins to just affect the highlighted region.
I shouldn't speak so loud. No.
Now I'm just going to turn it up because it seems pretty soft.
Never said guarantee.
All right.
I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say to...
Hopefully that's loud enough. If it does get too soft, you might have to turn it up on your end. So I actually just turned up the volume. The problem with these YouTube streams that I'm doing is that this isn't like mixed or mastered, right? These are like raw files. So if it's too soft, just turn it up as much as you can on your side. Obviously, if I'm going over plugins, it helps to be wearing headphones or have some sort of speaker setup.
Well, against the thought of you's just fine. Just fine.
Actually, I'm just going to set that. Let's do this. Okay, so let's go over EQs again, just very basically. Now, if I open up the standard Pro Tools EQ, we can talk a little bit about that again. Remember, an EQ is a device that you use to manipulate frequencies, which means that you can have, there's a way for you to add high end, low end, or whatever, right? Hey, what's up, Ori? We're on YouTube. There's 2 different links. Pick one, and I'll see you on that side. This video will be saved, whoever King Ferg is. I don't know if you're in my class. Oh, Randy. Okay, yeah. It'll be saved. Yeah, dude, everything I've done on these online
What background
things.
should I use?
Say it again. Oh. All right. So with this EQ, you can manipulate different frequencies. So if I have a vocal, like I said, you can turn up different frequencies, like high frequencies, low frequencies. So for example,
Untouched baby's just too good to be just good enough.
right, make it sound nice and hollow,
Love it temporarily. I
or
just
nice and
call
bright.
it like I see it. Yeah.
right? Very present-y sound. Remember that this is a parametric EQ because you can alter multiple parameters. You can alter the gain, which means you can turn the gain up and down at a certain frequency center. You can change the frequency center itself, or the center frequency itself, and you can also change the bandwidth, right? You can get a very narrow band going or a very wide band going. So it's pretty powerful, these parametric EQs. This particular EQ has an in and out meter, which tells you the signal, the level of the signal coming in,
Go ahead now, do your thing, baby. So hard.
and the level of the
Be
signal
discreet.
going out. So right now, because the EQ isn't doing anything, it's going to be the same. But as soon as I start to add some gain, right, you can see that the gain changes, because as you add or take away gain from your center frequency, you will start to you'll start to alter the gain, right? I just want to make sure that you guys can actually hear me. Test, test, test. I assume that you can hear me. If anything happens, just yeah, okay. Test. I assume that you can hear me. Wow, this shit is going crazy. So let's go ahead and EQ these vocals. Now, the typical EQ that I like to use, and I'm not going to get into EQs too much because we already went over it, but my favorite EQ is the FabFilter Q3, right? Not only does it have the spectrogram, which a lot of you guys like, so for example, right, you can see it represented in waveform over there. But the other cool thing is that you can just create as many bands as you want. So let's go ahead and start EQing this vocal.
Stretched out like a rubber band.
So all this information down here, this 50 hertz, we don't need any of that. And if you're wearing headphones or have like a good speaker setup, it's actually the kick drum from the beat playing in the control room. So it's completely useless information. And besides vocals, you know, none of this information down here in the lower frequencies is really important. That stuff is going to be taken up by bass and kick drums and 808s and stuff like that. So it doesn't make any sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a high pass filter.
Stretched out like a rubber band. She already got a master plan.
Now, like I said,
Waiting for me to find out what's in store.
for vocals, I usually don't go any higher than 80, because if you start to go further, you'll kill some of the body of the vocal. Let's try to find a place where you can hear that.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Ava.
But I can't give you what you need. But
Do me a favor and mute yourself on Zoom, because it's kind of cutting into the live feed.
What you say?
If you can mute yourself on Zoom, that would be great, because it's cutting into the live feed, because so people on YouTube can hear you if you're talking on Zoom. So just be careful.
Got you.
All right. So I think I left it at around 70.
say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Now, there's something about the
But
mid-range
I can't give you what you need.
that I don't really like, so I'm going to try to get rid of that. Now, what I can do is, if I'm not really sure where that frequency is, I can just boost up a frequency, maybe narrow the bandwidth a little bit, and then slide it across to start searching for that frequency sound that I don't like.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Right? So I'm like, I don't really like that. It's kind of boxy and weird. So what I can do is I can then duck it.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
And cleans up the vocals much, much more. And then finally, I can't remember who said this. It might have been Randy or it might have been somebody else. But now you can add some nice high end. Vocals usually do really well when you add some top end, especially above the 6,000 region. You can either add a shelf like this, but for me, I'm just going to do a bell shape.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
The other cool thing about this EQ is that it has the solo capability for different bands. So if I just want to listen to this bandwidth over here, I can actually solo it and it'll only play that. Check this out.
Black leather sticking to your skin.
Pretty cool, right?
Some
So I really like that feature. So this is why I really like the FabFilter EQ. This is only one of the reasons why. Another super dope thing about the FabFilter is that you can see the spectrogram of the vocal, but you can actually also program it to allow you to view another track's spectrogram. So if there's another vocal and I wanted to like see what that sounded like, I can actually set that up as well if I wanted to. Okay.
touch, baby's just too good to be just good enough.
Nice.
Love it temporarily, I just call it like I see, yeah.
All right, so we just did EQ, right? Nothing else. Let's go ahead and EQ this beat. I think we did that the other day, but I don't remember what we did. So there's definitely a lot of low end in this, so I definitely want to take some of that out. So let's go ahead and take some of the low end out. I don't want to kill it. I don't want to make a high shelf and kill the low end completely, but I do want to make a lower shelf, right? This gives like you can tell that there's a lot of warmth coming from around this mid region over here. So if you wanted to add more warmth to the beat, you can. This is a little bit too low endy, right? But up here, that synthesizer really starts to come out. That's that mid range over there. And if you wanted to add some high end, just to get the hi-hats out a little bit, kind of open up the top end a little bit, you can add some high end as well. Some people, what they do is they actually cut out a little bit of the region in the higher range so that you can create a space for the vocals to live. I'm not going to do that right now because I haven't heard how the beat and the vocals sit together, and they might just be fine. I might not need to do that. But some people will do that. They'll cut like around here so that they'll give that room for the vocals to breathe, right? So let's see what they sound like together.
Say too much, what's on my mind?
Now, I actually don't like what I did over here. It's a little too mid-rangey now.
Say too much, what's on my mind? My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine.
There you go.
Just fine, babe.
So that's actually a point that I should probably stress out, is that it's one thing to EQ an instrument or a beat or a vocal when you're just listening to that instrument on its own. But it's another thing to mix it in the context of everything else. And that's what matters more than the former, right? People don't listen to kick drums. They listen to beats. They don't listen to vocal harmonies. They listen to music. They listen to full songs, right? So you got to make sure that you're mixing in context of everything, okay? That's a really important point to make. All right. So right now, pretty happy.
Love it temporarily, I just call it like I see, yeah. Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave. Well, I can't give you what you need, but I can give you what you want right now.
Cool. So EQ wise, I'm going to live with that. That's totally fine. If I wanted to, I can actually add one last EQ on the master just to kind of open everything up.
Love it temporarily, I just call it like I see it, yeah. Say what you won't do
But very
for
subtle.
me, then force me not to leave. But I can't give you what you need, but I can give.
Right? So I'm just going to leave that for now. Let's start getting into this idea of compression, because this is like the hardest thing that you'll ever have to figure out as an audio engineer. Compression is the tool that you use for controlling dynamics. So when I say dynamics, I'm talking about volume or level, right? The difference between the softest part of your signal and the loudest part of your signal is called the dynamic range, right? Softest to loudest is your dynamic range. And a compressor allows you to control that dynamic range, either making it smaller or larger. So between your softest and your loudest part of your track or your signal, the compressor allows you to control that, right? All right. This is why I fucking hate this thing, man. So let's open up a standard Pro Tools compressor. So you do that by going to Plugins, Dynamics, and you can see that the standard Pro Tools compressor is called Dyne 3 Compressor Limiter. All right. So this is what it looks like. Super bland, super boring, super uninspiring, if you will. But, you know, this is great to learn what the concept of a compressor is because it has all the parameters that you need. Now, just like the EQ, you have an in meter and an out meter. Remember, the in meter is the signal coming into the compressor.
Go ahead now, do your thing, baby, so hard to
Right?
be discreet.
And the out meter is
When you say
the level of the signal going
me,
out
I
of the
start to
compressor.
go and get cold.
Right now, the compressor is not doing anything, so the in and out levels are exactly the same. Now, this little triangle over here is one of the parameters that you're going to use to compress. Now, here's where it gets super important, right? A compressor has a threshold, and until that threshold is crossed, nothing happens. So if you have your signal, right, over here, like your signal's going up and down, up and down, up and down, if your threshold is above it, the compressor's not going to do anything. Once you bring your threshold down and the signal starts to cross the threshold, that's when compression starts. So once the signal crosses the threshold, then the compressor pushes it down. So this thing over here, I got to pull it down.
Go ahead now, do your thing, baby, so hard to be discreet. But when you say you got me, oh, I start to go and get cold feet.
Right?
Now I might leave some.
What's happening on the right side, this GR, is called gain reduction, right? Because what are you doing with the compressor? You're reducing the gain. It's called gain reduction, and that signifies the amount of level that the signal is being reduced by, the amount of gain that the signal is being reduced by. So it can be, you can see that there's a meter on the side of the gain reduction. If I do something like this,
Go ahead now, do.
you're getting about 6 dB of gain reduction. Now the question is, how does the compressor even determine that? Well, there's a couple of more parameters to understand. One is called the ratio, right? The ratio is determining how much compression is happening. So if your ratio is 3:1, that means if your threshold is here and your signal crosses the threshold by 3 dB, the compressor pushes it down to 1 dB, right? If your compressor has this threshold over here, if you have your signal here and your ratio is 3:1, once the signal crosses 3 dB, it gets pushed down to 1 dB above the threshold. Once it crosses 3 dB above the threshold, it becomes 1 dB above the threshold. If it goes to 6, then it becomes 2. 9, 3. 12, 4, right? It's always being divided by 3. That's 3:1. That's the ratio. Whereas if my ratio was, say, 6:1, right? That means if my threshold is here, my signal gets compressed by a 6:1 ratio. So it's whatever amount that crosses the threshold, it gets divided by 6. So that's what the ratio is. How much compression is happening. Then you have attack and release, right? Attack is if this is your threshold and your signal crosses that threshold, how fast does the compressor actually kick in and make that signal compressed? Now, you might think automatically it's like, oh, it should just compress immediately, right? And the answer is no, because you can determine when to start compressing. Right now, the attack is 10 milliseconds, which means once the signal crosses the threshold, it waits 10 milliseconds before it pushes it down. Release is once you have compressed, how long does it take to let go of that compression or release the compression, right? Now, attack and release are very, very, very hard to master, but just know that if you have a instrument or a signal that you want to make more even, you have a fast attack that you want to use. If you want to make something pop more, like a kick drum or a beat, you want it to have a stronger punch, you want to set a slightly slower attack. So fast attack for evening things out, slow attack for making things pop a little bit more. In the case of a vocal, you want a fast attack for this because I want to even out the vocals, right? So just to give you like a visual idea of what happens, let me just choose a random part where you can see the signal jumps up and down, right? You can see that over here. Yeah, you see how the signal is it pops up over here and then it kind of comes down over here, right? If I highlight this and run it through a compressor with a pretty aggressive ratio, watch what happens, right? That was crazy right there, but essentially, you see that? That's what a compressor does. It evens out your vocals. So that was before, and this is after. So you see how all the big spikes are all gone now? That's what a compressor does. Okay? That's the idea of a compressor. And to hear it is even harder. So let's just try to listen to that.
Say what you won't do for me. Say what you won't do for me.
Now, to most people, that sounds exactly the same. And this is kind of where that whole training your ears comes into play, because it's not the same. You can actually hear that a lot of his breaths are a lot more, you can hear it in the compressed version.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Very, very present, right?
Well, like I see, yeah. Say what you
right.
See, yeah. Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
It's also a lot more static. It's very, very, very evened out. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends on the context of the song, right?
Yeah. Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Whereas that has a little bit more dynamics in it. There's a little bit more up-down motion. Now, dynamics are not bad, but by design, actually, dynamics are good because they give your song character and flow. You don't want your song to be just like blah, 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 monotone the whole time. You want it to have its peaks and valleys. You want it to take you on a journey, right? That's kind of the whole point of music at the end of the day. So you don't want to completely kill dynamics, but just understand that a compressor can help you manage those dynamics. So make things a little bit more evened out. For example, if you had a section where the vocals were being lost in the mix, like certain words are not coming out properly, you can use compression to help even things out, and that might help you get a much cleaner, more consistent vocal, right? Okay. So let's go ahead and add some compression on this.
Mama.
So I'm going to go ahead and set my ratio to around 5 to, let's do 6 to 1. That's pretty standard. 4 to 1, 6 to 1 is good for vocals. 6 to 1 is pretty aggressive, but I'm just going to see what that sounds like first.
Mama, mama. So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much what's on my mind. My mind.
So that's a lot more evened out in my ears. Obviously, this is a very, very difficult thing to hear. So if you can't hear it, don't worry about it. Once you're on Pro Tools in front of it, what you'd want to do is really listen to it on your own headphones, on speakers that you use. And I would push it to the extreme to really hear it. So for example, I would do something like this just to listen to what it sounds like.
And I say too much what's on my mind.
Right? Just to get an idea of what it sounds like.
My mind. So I guess
So that's what a compressor does. And hopefully that made sense. But it basically, whenever the signal gets too loud, it pushes it down so that it evens out the signal. Or in the context of like a beat or a kick drum or a snare, it can allow you to make the kick drum and snare pop a lot more depending on your settings, right? So your threshold is the level after which compression starts. Your ratio is how much compression happens. Your attack is how fast does the compressor kick in. Your release is how fast does the compressor let go. Now, the release is really kind of more tempo-based because if you set your release too fast, you could hear that whole pumping action happening, and that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it's a great thing. But too slow of a release, then your compressor might actually catch the next round of the signal coming in and then compress it more than it actually needs to. I know this stuff sounds really complicated, and it is very, very difficult, but again, it's just consistency, doing it over and over and over again, and really training your ears to listen to what's out there. Then there's a gain knob, and you might be wondering, well, why do I need a gain knob? Well, essentially with a compressor, what you're doing is you are compressing the signal. You are losing level. You're reducing the level in some way, right?
I guess the thought of you's just fine.
Right? If I really compress,
Just fine, babe.
we lost so much level. We're getting 30 dB of gain reduction. So if you're going to be reducing the gain of the signal, then you need something to make up that gain at the end. And that's what gain is for. It's called makeup gain because you compress your signal to like even out the levels, but then you need to increase the overall level again. And the best way I can show you how to do that is, let's find that other thing again. So look, we have a very dynamic vocal. It's got some highs, it's got some lows. Let's go ahead and compress it like we did last time. Let's make it like ridiculously compressed. Okay. See how the compressor just completely reduces it? Now, it's not nothing. It's still something, but it's very, very evened out. Let me do something a little less extreme so that you're not freaking out over there. Okay, so look at that. If you have this very, very dynamic vocal and you compress it, now the vocals are much more evened out, but you lost level at the end of the day. So what you do is you make it up with this makeup knob. So it's much closer to what you had. Right? So it's much closer, but it's much more evened out as well. So let's listen to this.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Little ups and downs, but now.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Right? A lot more evened out. And because we made up the gain, it sounds about the same volume. Now that's a very extreme case, and I would never do it that aggressively, but hopefully you were able to hear it. Again, if not, don't worry about it. So, me personally, the compressor is a very, very powerful tool. It's very, very difficult. It took me a very long time to understand how to work these things and even how to hear them or even like what I'm listening for, right? It's very, very difficult, and it's something that you have to train your ears to listen to. You have to listen to how it's affecting the signal. Listen to how the words in between the words, like the little softer words are becoming louder, or the breaths in between the words are becoming louder because the compressor is evening everything out. It's basically making everything the same level or very similar level, right? And then once you even understand it and like really can hear it, it's a whole nother game to really master it as well. So cool. Now, the knee is actually this little joint over here, and I don't really use this too much, but it's good to know. The smoothness of the compression is what the knee basically determines. And the easiest way to really understand this is by watching what happens at this point. Remember, this line over here is your signal. The orange line is your threshold, right? If I turn this up and down. And the line afterwards is your compressed signal. So
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to run.
and if you adjust the knee, this is what it looks like over here. Look over here.
Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to run.
Right? So it's a much smoother transition from signal to compressed signal. Now, I don't use that too much. I used to use a much harder, softer knee for vocals and a harder knee for like kick drums and stuff. But I ended up not really enjoying that, so I don't really use the knee function. And I don't really use a compressor that has the knee function, unfortunately. I hope you guys are still here. This is so fucking terrible. But 'tis life, right? Now, I want to show you the compressor that I like to use, especially on vocals. One of my favorite compressors ever, actually, is the LA2A compressor with the UAD software. So let's just go ahead and pick up the legacy one over here. This guy is a fucking beast. Now, the thing you might actually notice is that, wait a second. How come there's no threshold, attack, release, none of that stuff? Where's all the different buttons? And all those parameters are still present in the plugin, but you don't have control over them. You only have control over the amount of compression, which is essentially like your threshold, and the gain. Now, I will say that even though it seems like you have less control, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because especially like a company like Universal Audio, they make extremely good plugins. So even if you have less control, it's still going to sound way better than, your typical, 8-bit crazy standard stock plugin. So just check this out. It sounds really good.
Love it temporarily, in love trying to get you some. Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to run. Well, I can't give you what you need, but I can give you what you want right now. Never said guarantee, I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much, what's on my mind, my mind.
I don't know. To me, it sounds amazing. I'm going to bypass it. So by bypassing it, I turn it off. And you can listen to what it sounds like before and after. So before.
And I say too much, what's on my mind.
And after.
And I say too much, what's on my mind.
Much more full and, has that body. I shouldn't say much more because, again, it's a subtle change. And if you don't hear it, it's not really a big deal. But just so you know, it is affecting the signal. Hey, what's up, Patrick? I got 2 videos going simultaneously. Pick your choice. I just put it in the chat, and I will see you on YouTube.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So that's compression for some vocals. Again, if you don't understand it fully, it takes time. I'm fucking tired of saying that, so I'm going to stop saying that. Let's add a compressor on the beat. Now, this is a little bit different because for the beat, I actually want to have it pop a little bit more. I want the punch to come out a little bit more on the kick drum especially. So what I can do is I can add a compressor. Let's use... let's use this one. So this is another FabFilter. If you haven't guessed right now, FabFilter is one of my favorite plugin companies. And in this particular case, you have your threshold, ratio, attack, release, and all these things. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my attack to about 25 to 30 milliseconds, okay? So let's do something like this. Okay. So if we have an attack of 25 milliseconds, 25 to 30 milliseconds, what's happening is you're going to allow the transients to push through the compressor unaffected, and then right after that, it's going to clamp down on the tail ends. So in a sense, you're still compressing, but you're compressing a little after the transients. So the transients actually start to stick out more than the tails, right? And that gives this illusion that something hits harder. So again, slower attack for kick drums and snare drums and beats, and faster attack if you want to even things out. So let's see what this does. I'm going to set the threshold up afterwards. I'm going to do something extreme to make sure you can hear it first. So this is a pretty extreme compression, but what I want you to try to hear is if you can try to notice the kick drum popping out a little bit more. Right? Whereas if I had a much faster attack, now everything is just compressed, right? Everything's kind of just evened out. But that's not what we want. We want the kick drum to pop out a little bit more. So I set my compressor up, and then I want it to be very, very subtle, obviously, right? I don't want it to be that extreme. So how's that? Again, it's very subtle, but there is a slight bit more punch in the kick drum. I'm going to play it before and after again. So before the compressor, listen to the kick drum. And then after, it's so subtle, man. It's not even, it's pretty ridiculous. But that subtle stuff really does matter. And because I'm getting about 3 dB of gain reduction, I'll just make up that gain with the makeup gain over there. So again, this compressor is similar to the default one that I showed you just a second ago. It has all these parameters available. Typically, I don't use this on a beat, but I figured might as well try it right now. So now we've got EQ and compression on the individual tracks. Let's see what happens when we play it together now.
I guess the thought of you's just fine.
Just reduce the vocals a little bit.
Just fine, babe. So I say too much what's on my mind. My mind.
Now check this out. What I'm going to do right now is we have the beat over here. Right, I'm actually going to just name this beat. And then we have the vocals over here. Oh, yeah. Right? And both of them are going to the master bus right here. Now, a very typical thing to do is to add a compressor on the master bus. And what that does is, or the mix bus, I should say. Same thing, kind of. But essentially what that does is, in the same way that you're compressing the individual tracks, now you can compress the overall song. So maybe if the song needs to be evened out a little bit more, or if you want to give the song a little bit more of a push and pull, or if you want to make sure that the instruments and the vocals are kind of all glued together, a compressor is great for that. So let's go ahead and add a compressor. Let's use something else. Let's use like this is, again, I'm going to go over all this again in class, like what an EQ compressor is. I just want this to be a little bit more fun and a chance for you to just maybe see some of the plugins that I like to use, right? So I'm going to go ahead and open up this thing called the Virtual Mix Rack. Hopefully it will open because I know I'm doing a lot of things right now. Oh, yeah. So this is by a company called Steven Slate, or Slate Digital, I should say. It's like a rack unit that you can add a bunch of cool plugins onto. I'm going to go ahead and find a compressor and add it onto this track. So let's say this is a very popular compressor. It's called a distressor. Very, very popular, especially like, you know, hip hop vocals, rock vocals, metal vocals. Very, very popular. One of the best compressors ever made, the distressor. I'm not going to use that on the mix bus. Maybe I'll use this. So this is actually a compressor that's modeled off the SSL bus compressor, which is, again, one of the coolest compressors out there. The console that you guys have in Mod 3, that has a compressor on the actual console, and this is an emulation of that. So if we set the attack and release relatively in the middle, let's just see what happens if we do this.
Black leather sticking to your skin.
Let's go somewhere here.
My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind.
I could take it or leave it, but because the problem is it's only really catching the instrumental side of things, so it's not really doing too much. But it is adding a bit of flavor to the mix, so I might as well just go ahead and keep it, right? But what I want to show you now is I'm going to take all the plugins off. I'm going to bypass them. And all the differences that you heard, even if you heard nothing, even if you're like, okay, you made all these little changes, but I don't hear the difference at all. Let's now listen to it completely before, completely raw, and then completely after all the plugins. And I promise you there will be a difference, even if it's super subtle. Okay? So just listen to before.
Say too much. What's on my mind? My mind.
And then after.
So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe.
Before.
So I say too much. What's on my mind?
And then after.
My mind.
Right? Clearly there's a difference. If you can't pinpoint it technically, you can probably hear it, right? Hopefully you can. If not, it might be because you're just listening on your phone. You definitely need to have headphones or a speaker setup, but these little differences do make a big change in the big picture. And that's what I said before, right? The little changes that I'm making over here might look trivial and insignificant, but once they start to add up on top of each other, they become very, very, very important. Just for completely fun shits and giggles, I'm going to add a plugin that you may or may not like, and I just want to see what it does. It's like a tape machine emulation. I think it's pretty cool.
So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind.
Pretty cool. The snare is pretty harsh, so I'm gonna go get rid of that.
So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much.
So that's that. Remember that 2K, 4K region, 1K, 2K, 4K region I was talking about? There's a lot of harsh frequencies that usually live in there, so you can kind of just sweep for them and then duck them out a little bit. It kind of tames out the harshness, especially after you add compressors and stuff. It becomes really important. So that's where another thing that I've mentioned before, gain staging, comes into play. Because right now you've seen me add the EQ first and then the compressor, and there's a very legit reason for that. It's not by accident. It's actually very intentional, right? It's because the compressor reacts differently to the signals coming in based on the frequency distribution. So if you have a lot of low end, the compressor is going to act all crazy because it's got a lot of information in the low end to deal with. Whereas if you tame out the low end, like we did over here, and then start to add the compression, you get a much more evened out, subtle, but effective use of a compressor. Okay? So again, this video is going to be up here for, well, I guess as long as I live, or as long as I'm alive. And then also I've done, intro to plugins in this same channel. I've done a ton of shit on this channel. Most of it is like this stuff. So feel free to refer to that if you need to. And obviously I'm going to go over all this again on Monday in class, in person. So hopefully you can hear that we're making something of a difference in this track from the before and the after, right? Now, one thing that I'm going to talk about next is this idea of routing in Pro Tools, okay? So right now you have a beat track and a vocal track, and both of them are going to output 1 and 2, which is your monitor left and right. You can actually see that as well as output, there's this thing called buses that you can choose from as well, right? These buses labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what are these for? Now, if I set the output of, say, the beat to bus 1 and 2,
So
you can't actually hear the beat anymore, right? Because it's not going to the monitor left and right. It's going to this virtual fake bus called bus 1 and 2. So maybe your question then is, well, what's the purpose of these virtual buses? And we actually use buses to send signals from one place to another within Pro Tools. One second. Hey, what's up, man? There's a link in the chat to one of 2 videos, and you can choose which one you want. All right.
Wait, I'm confused. We have to watch videos?
No, I was just saying that like Ori just came in, so I just wanted to let him know that there's a live thing going on right now and a video from the past. So you can choose which one you want. If you're new to everything, you should definitely watch the live stream. If you're super advanced and know what you're doing, you should watch the video of me just mixing stuff. All right.
And all I have to do is watch the links for today, and that's it?
Yeah. That's so I'm on YouTube live right now, just going over basics of plugins. That's the second video link. And the first one is just me mixing a song. And they're both pretty long, so that's all we're going to do today.
Got you. Thanks.
Yep. On YouTube live right now, just going over. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue. Okay, so routing, right? In order to use reverbs and delays and any kind of time-based effects, we actually use this idea of buses, okay? Now here's how it works. You see that you have inserts over here, right? The inserts are where you add your effects like EQ, compression, right? All these are added on the inserts. But then there's this other column over here called sends. Sends A through E, A, B, C, D, E. And you can also add more sends if you want to. Sends F through J. Okay? So for now, I'm going to use these sends to set up what's called a reverb aux. Okay? Now, I don't know if you remember this, but in one of the first lessons, we actually created a stereo aux input, right? And we created this, and I remember I said that all your auxes always hold command and click on the solo button so that they're permanently soloed. That you should just get used to that by default, right? So if you create a stereo aux input, remember this is a track that doesn't have any clip on it, but it allows signal to pass in and out of it. This is what we're going to use for the actual reverb plugin or the reverb vocals, whatever, right? Once you create the aux track, the first thing you do is command click the solo button so that it's permanently soloed or solo safed. Then you add your reverb plugin. In this case, I'm going to choose your standard Dverb by Pro Tools. Whenever you have the reverb on an aux, because of the way you're going to set it up, you're going to set it to maximum 100% wet, right? You have a dry wet knob in most reverbs, but if you're using this method, which is pretty standard and like very, very useful, you set the mix to 100% wet, okay? Dry just means raw vocals. Wet means 100% reverb vocals. If you actually did the consoles with me over the last day or two, you might understand where this is going, and this is very useful to know. Now, a reverb obviously just creates space, right? The illusion of space. And what I want to do is I want to send a copy of this vocal to this reverb. So how do I do that? I use the buses that we talked about to connect the two tracks. So this reverb aux, I'm going to call it Vox Verb, and I'm going to set the input to bus 1 and 2. Doesn't matter which bus, any number is fine, right? But bus 1 and 2 is what's available. Then I'm going to go to the send on the vocal track over here, go to the sends section, click on this, and send a copy to bus 1 and 2. Now, that's very important, okay? A very, very important distinction is that the sends send a copy of the signal to whichever bus you choose. So now, this vocal is going to monitor left and right over here. So it's going to my headphones. Then it's also going to bus 1 and 2 based on how much I send with this fader. So as I turn this fader up, it goes to this aux track, and then we'll be able to hear some reverb.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind.
Right? So you're sending more and more of the vocal to the aux track or the reverb track, and then you're hearing the reverb track as well as the dry track. A good way to look at it is if we look at it from the mix windows perspective, again, you have your vocal track here. Your vocals are being EQ'd, then compressed. Then it's going to your fader, which comes out to your monitor left and right. I'm actually going to name this Mon LR so you can see it. Right? It goes to your monitor left and right. And then a copy is going to bus 1 and 2 as well. Right? Bus 1 and 2 connects to this aux over here, this reverb aux that we've created. And as I turn this up, more of the vocal goes to the reverberated track.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much. What's on my...
Right? And then you have the dry vocals on one fader and the reverb vocals on a different fader, and you can balance them out accordingly here or determine how much you want to send in the first place over here with the send, right? This is called the send, okay? Now, another way you can pull that up is by holding Command and clicking on the arrow so that it just appears in this. I really like this view.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
Now, obviously, this reverb is pretty trash, so one thing we can do is start messing around with the settings. For one, you have all these different types, right? Hall reverb, church reverb, plate reverb, room, ambient, nonlinear. And then within those, you have a couple of settings like small, medium, large, depending on the size of the room that you want, right? You can also see that as you change this value is changing too. So what is the decay? Well, decay is the amount of time it takes for the reverb to go down to 0 or to effectively become non-audible. So if it's 4.5 seconds, then it takes 4.5 seconds for the reverb to go all the way to 0. Your pre-delay is an interesting setting. So if you think about what reverb is, like when I say reverb gives you the context of a room, basically what's happening is your voice is being reflected off of all these different surfaces and then coming back to the person. So it sounds like a full room, right? It sounds like a reverberated room. So the time difference between your original voice and the very first reflection is called the pre-delay. And usually it gives you a sense of how big the room is or like what kind of depth we're looking at. So it's an interesting setting to play with, but that's the theory behind it. Then you have a diffusion button, which basically determines how much diffusion is going on, right? How is your signal being spread across the room? And then you have these EQs, a high frequency cut and a low pass filter, right? These are just basically EQs built into the reverb design. So if we start messing with these, we might get a slightly more pleasing reverb.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. Well, I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine.
Right? So you can start messing around with these and understand that reverb gives you some, sense of space, right? That's kind of the whole idea. Now, what I do want to say is you might be wondering, wait, why do I have to set up this whole bus 1 and 2 to aux this, reverb this? Why do I have to do all this? Why can't I just put the reverb on the insert over here and then just like fiddle around with the dry wet knob, right? Essentially, we're doing the same thing, right? If I do that, look at all my presets, right? So if I do that and I just play with the wet dry, wouldn't it be the same shit?
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much. What's on my...
Right? And essentially, you might be wondering, well, isn't that the same thing? Well, a couple of things are different. One is that, yes, you have control over dry and wet, but you only have control over the dry and wet for this vocal. Imagine a scenario where you have 10 vocals. Are you going to put a reverb on all of them, all the same settings? No, it's inefficient, right? So what you do is, instead of having reverbs on every single track over here, you send a copy of all the reverbs to your reverb unit over here. And you can determine how much goes to the reverb for each track based on that. So it's a much more efficient way of actually doing time-based effects. The other cool thing about it is that, okay, you've got a reverb over here, but now you actually can process and manipulate just the reverberated signal on its own. So what if I wanted to add a flanger effect, but just on the reverb part of the vocal, not on the dry vocal, right? Check this out.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
Right? And I go to the next plugin and I go say, hey, ooh, Enigma. What? Haven't used this in a while.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. So I I guess the thought of you's just fine. I just
I don't know if you can hear that on your end, but it sounds dope.
never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And
Ah, what? I like that.
never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And
See that? So what's happening is that you're processing only the reverb part, right? The dry vocals are the same, but the reverb is changing. So check this out. I'm going to bypass this Enigma plugin.
never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No.
Okay, not bad. Let's add a fucking Enigma on it.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And
Ooh, you know what I mean? It just gives more character to your sound. It makes it a lot more interesting than just like a fucking reverb again, right? So that's the power of this aux sending thing. You can really process and get a little bit more fine-tuned with it. And I think it's really awesome. So let's actually choose, now that you've seen what a basic reverb can do, let me show you the types of reverbs that I like to use in my... Let me show you my fucking shit. A really good one, again, I hate to fucking put these guys on blast, but the FabFilter Pro R is really great.
never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No.
It's like fucking butter, dude. I love it.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much. What's on my mind?
And you can see that this particular reverb, along with all the different kinds of settings we talked about, like space is basically decay, right? But along with all that stuff is you have an EQ. You can EQ the signal of the EQ coming in and out of the reverb, which I think is really cool.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. Well, I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine.
Whatever. I don't really have any. This song doesn't really need too much reverb because it's much more R&B vibes. Let's see. What other reverb is pretty cool? Oh, this is one of my favorites. Lustrous Plates. Oh, fucking beautiful reverb. Ah, yes. Please authorize in the middle of a live stream. I love it when that happens. Yeah, sure. Go for it. Go for it. Yeah. Whatever. Do your fucking thing. Come on. Come on. And don't be stingy. All right. Okay. So, so this is another type of reverb that you can use. I particularly like this because, again, it just sounds super smooth, especially on vocals.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind.
Right? So let's just stick with that for now. So look, that's how you set up a reverb. Okay, very, very important. You use buses and auxes. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing again, but this time I'm going to do it for delay. So first thing you do is create a stereo aux input. I'm going to call this Vox delay. hold Command, click on the solo button. Input, set it to a bus that's available. You can see that the buses in use are highlighted yellow. The ones in white are available to use. Add your delay plugin. Let's say for now I'm going to use the basic Pro Tools one. And then you send a copy of your vocal track to that same bus, bus 3 and 4. Add your delay plugin. Let's say for now okay, just be careful not to unmute on Zoom because I will hear that. Everyone will hear that.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud.
Right? So as they turn this up, you get more and more signal going to the delay. And that's where you can hear the delay come in. Now, delay plugins are pretty easy to understand. It's just repetition of the actual signal. So if you have somebody saying, hey, you'll get, hey, hey, right? That's a delay. Now, depending on the settings that you choose, you can modify that what the delay actually does. So let's take an example. Let's solo the vocals. Let's open this up. And again, Command, click on this arrow to open up this little shorthand view. Let's just turn it up a little bit.
Never.
Right?
Never.
It repeats the signal. Now, how fast does it repeat the signal? Well, that's what this little delay time thingy is for. Now, in this particular plugin, you can actually link the left and the right. Remember, I created a stereo aux, so that means there is a left and right side to the delay. I don't want to create different delays on either side for now. I just want them to be exactly the same. So I can link whatever happens in the left side to whatever happens in the right side. So as I turn this knob up, the time difference between the original and the delayed signal goes up. So this is the original.
Never.
If I turn it up all the way.
Never. Never.
Right? So if I do this.
Never. Never. Never.
Right? So that's the time difference between the original and the delayed signal. Now, if you want to get it exactly in time with what the song is about, you have to have the BPM already decided. Like, you have to know the BPM. This is why I stressed it so much in the beginning. Is like, if you know the BPM of the song, it helps in so many regards, in editing, in fixing issues, in time delays, in reverb effects, right? Automation, all these things become a billion times easier. So just take the time and do it. Now, if you know your BPM, you can actually set your delays to occur at very, very specific increments of time. Like down here, you can say, choose half notes, or quarter notes, or eighth notes, or 16th notes. You can also choose triplets or dotted notes as well. So look, if I do quarter notes, then it will be exactly in time with the tempo.
Never.
Right? Now, it's only repeating once, and that's because my feedback is set to 0. A feedback, basically, it's exactly what it sounds like, but it takes the original, or rather, the original goes into the delay, then you get the delayed version. Then it takes the delayed version and then puts that back into the delay for another repetition, and then it goes back and feeds back the delayed signal to have multiple delays. So if I turn up the feedback, you get more repetitions. So check this out.
Never.
If I turn it up more.
Never.
Right? And then if I go all the way,
Never.
it's just going to repeat forever. Does that sound fun? Having fun? All right. So usually I start around 40. 40 is like a good number. But again, if you have that plus you choose your note value, you're going to be in time with the beat. So check this out.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine.
right? So it's on time. Now, obviously, there's a lot going on when you turn up the delay, which is why we use something called automation, which we'll get into later. But you see what the delay does. It gives a little bit more character to it. Now, again, this is where the beauty of using the aux comes into play, right? You can actually start adding effects. So that whole Enigma thing that I showed you, which is basically like a modulator, like it adds these cool, interesting effects. You can add that effect on just the delayed signal. So let's do this.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. So
Man, if you're hearing what I'm hearing, it's basically the original vocals sound raw and like personal, but then the delayed vocals have these really cool kind of modulation, weird effects on them. This is the beauty of using auxes. Like, I love it.
never,
I'm gonna mute the beat, so listen to this.
never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. So I guess
Yo, this is why I fucking got into this business, man. Fuck yeah. It fucking sounds so good. I love doing this stuff.
never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much. What's on my mind? My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe.
Right? So you can really start to get some really interesting vocals. At least I think so. And now, let's go into one more type of plugin called a de-esser. So you know what a compressor does, right? It compresses or reduces the level of a signal after it crosses that certain threshold, right? But a de-esser does that, but it only does it for the higher frequencies. So if I open up the standard Pro Tools one, man, Pro Tools needs to up its design, man. Look how boring this shit looks. What you can do is, if you press the HF only, you will compress the high end of the signal. So in vocals, it's very common to put a de-esser to reduce the harshness of all the S's, right? So check this out.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No.
So if you think, oh man, those S's kind of pop a little bit too much, you can actually set your frequency up to where you can hear the S's and then reduce them without affecting any other part of the vocal.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much.
Right? Without it.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much.
With it.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. No. And I say too much.
Right, so obviously that's an extreme version. I would never do it that harsh, but hopefully you can hear the difference in how it's reducing and taming out the S's. The cool thing about this plugin is that you can listen to just the S's that you're affecting by clicking on the listen button.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud. And
Right? Now, obviously, I'm not going to use the Pro Tools one. I'm going to use one of my own. And god damn it, you already know. You already know. I'm going to fucking use this FabFilter de-esser. Right? So this actually lets you choose the range that you want to start reducing. So it's very similar to something called a multi-band compressor. And then it also allows you to choose the amount that you reduce it by and the threshold, meaning where does the signal start to de-ess. So the threshold is the same as the concept of a compressor. When does the signal start to compress or de-ess? And the range is similar to like the ratio in a compressor where it's like how much de-essing or how much compression actually happens.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much what's on my mind.
Now, one thing you got to be really careful about when you de-ess is that if you de-ess too much, it sounds very, very hollow, not hollow, very, very muffled. And sometimes it can even sound like the person has like a lisp or something. So watch what happens if I de-ess too hard.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much what's on my mind. My mind. Never said guarantee.
Right? It totally kills the presence of the vocals. A lot of the nice parts of vocals are the higher sounds, but you don't want them to be too harsh. That's why you need to control them. All these tools are here. I think Lewis might have said it, like, they help you control different aspects of the signal.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. And I say too much what's on my mind. My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much what's on my mind. My mind.
Right? Now look, see how far we've come from the beginning of this song? Right? So before, this is what the song sounded like. Let's choose a different part because we can listen to this a bit.
Temporary.
Right? This is before. How crazy is this? This is before.
Loving temporarily, I just call it like I see it, yeah. Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Which is fine, but I think this is better.
Loving temporarily, I just call it like I see it, yeah. Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to leave.
Now, obviously, it's louder. That's not what I want you to listen to. I want you to listen to the tonal characteristics that's changed, right? EQs that have changed, the S's that are a lot less harsher, the snare, which is a lot less aggressive, the little delay and reverb that's going on to add a little bit more flavor to it. That's what I want you to listen to at the end of the day. And that's what makes these big differences in records. So, pretty powerful stuff here, right? Now, let's go into the idea of a multi-band compressor, because I just went over compression. I know this is a lot of information, but the reason why I'm dumping all this stuff on you is because I am basically going to be talking this whole time. There's no interactions. This is going to be up for, whenever. Maybe I'll take it down at some point, but you can always refer back to it. And look, I know you guys. Look, if I was sitting at home and I was online learning, man, what? I'd be fucking... Yeah, basically. No, let me not say that. I'd be fucking around, watching TV and eating chips, getting McDonald's, fucking halal food, whatever, apple pies. Yeah, that's what I might do after this, actually. So, a multi-band compressor is actually a great combination of EQ and compression. So if we take, I actually don't know if Pro Tools has a standard multi-band compressor, but let's take the FabFilter one. So you see that first it lets you choose a range, right? And what happens is it allows you to set up a compressor, right? All these parameters look very, very familiar, don't they? Like threshold, range, which is like ratio, attack and release. But it allows you to set up a compressor only for that range. So if you take a beat and choose a section of the spectrum, you can even solo it. And you can start compressing the individual ranges. This is the power of a multi-band compressor, especially when you don't have access to the stems. Like I don't have the stems for this beat, but now I can control different aspects of the beat using a multi-band compressor. let's try to get that low end pump coming from the kick drum a little bit more. Ooh. Oh yeah. Kick drums usually live around like the 50, 60 hertz. That low pump of a kick drum is usually there. So that's where I'm focusing, right? Oh, we got... There we go. And if I still think that the snare is a little bit too aggressive, I can find it and then do a multiband compressor so that only when the snare hits does it duck out that frequency. That's not what I wanted. Yeah, it's that 3-4K range. All right. So that's what a multiband compressor does. Again, I don't use the multiband too much unless I'm in like a very dire situation. And the reason is pretty obvious. Is like if you have the stems to a track, then you don't really need to use the multibands too much because you have all the individual components. It's when you don't have access to those kinds of things where this becomes very, very, very powerful, right? But that's essentially what a multiband does. It allows you to create compressors for very specific bandwidths in the spectrum. I'm kind of just like rolling through a bunch of different types of plugins. Hopefully this is like really useful stuff. And by the way, you can write stuff in the chat if you want, you know, give me company. Just saying. Oh, Randy and Jarrell and Wilson. Oh, I appreciate all you guys. Yeah. I see these comments coming in. Okay. So, why don't we go to something a little bit more interesting? Tuning is a big part of any kind of production, right? It's a big turnoff when you have like a really good song, but like the person is off key. Now, there is a delicate balance to strike because you don't want pitch perfect for certain genres, but then you don't want, you know, completely, you know, raw and organic for other genres. So like, you know, pop, hip hop, all these places, like most of the time they're going for this really perfect pitch kind of thing. That's why they slap on that auto tune pretty aggressively. And you can start to hear it once you train your ears. That's going to be a fucking meme. Once you train your ears. But there's a couple of ways to tune vocals, and one of them is auto tune, where it the software automatically detects the pitch changes that it makes, and then it allows you to adjust it. But then there's another way with a software called Melodyne, which is actually one that I use more frequently. It allows you to manually tune vocals, and it makes it sound a lot more organic. So for this kind of music, autotune is not a great idea. It'll sound way too fake in a more organic setting. So if I go to my plugin set and go to Melodyne, Celemony is the name of the company. This is a really cool software. Now, the one thing that you have to understand about this software, which is a little bit outdated in my personal opinion, but it sounds so good, which is why I love it, is that you have to actually transfer your clips into the Melodyne software and then only adjust. So let's take an example of where the pitch could be better.
Black leather sticking to your skin, red lips dripping from your grin. Looks like I gotta learn a little more. Loving temporarily, in love trying to get you some. Say what you won't do for me, then force me not to run. Well, I can't give you what you need, but I can give you what you want right now.
Trying to find something obvious.
Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
So, okay, I don't know if you hear it or not, but I couldn't find something too obvious for some reason. Maybe he's okay. But I shouldn't speak so loud, no, is a little flat.
I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
So what you can do is
I shouldn't speak.
you can actually hit transfer on this Melodyne plugin, then hit play,
I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
and then it shows up in the actual graphical view of Melodyne. And then within this, you can actually change the pitch.
Loud. I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
Right? Now, if you go too crazy, obviously, it's not going to work as smoothly. It's not going to sound as organic. But if you're subtle with it,
I shouldn't speak so loud, no. So loud. I shouldn't speak. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. I shouldn't speak so. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
I shouldn't speak.
I shouldn't speak so. So I shouldn't speak so loud. I shouldn't speak so. I shouldn't speak so loud, no. Never said guarantee. I shouldn't speak so loud, no.
Right? So you can start modifying it very, very carefully. You don't want to adjust it too much because then you'll really kill the whole performance. But just little things like the tail end, it's good to be able to fix that stuff.
What's on my mind? My mind. So well, I guess the thought of you's just fine. I just find it. So
I is flat.
So
you can go ahead, open up Melodyne, transfer, and then kind of move it up a little bit.
Well, I say too much.
And the cool thing about Melodyne is that you can actually split the notes into different sections. I know this is going to sound crazy, but just check it out. Right? Now that's fucking crazy, but in case there's some people in here that like to get really creative with plugins and don't use them for the actual intended use, that's something you can start playing around with.
Well, I say too much,
Now, here's the only problem with Melodyne.
so I
Suppose I'm like, I want to edit this. I'm like, delete this. Here's what happens.
just find you. So well,
How crazy is that? There's nothing here, but what it's doing is it's playing it from the Melodyne plugin.
so well,
This is the only frustrating thing about Melodyne that I can think of, is that you have to be very, very careful when you use it, because if you edit afterwards, then it's like it's a pain in the ass. Now, there's obviously ways to get around it and like, you know, make it work, but again, I just find it kind of, I wish they didn't have it like this. That's all. I think newer plugins have done it a little better, so I don't know if they've done an update for this, but there you go. All right, so we've got Melodyne going. See if we can find some other pitch thing.
so well, I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine.
I want to see if I can correct or show you how to correct that.
Well, I guess the thought of you's just fine.
I mean, it's dead on pretty much, but you see how it splits it up? I think that's really cool.
Well, I guess the thought of you. Well, I guess the thought. Well, I guess the thought of you. Well, I guess the thought
Of.
Well, I guess the thought of you.
So you can even modify the scoop up.
Well, I guess the thought of you's just. Well, I guess the thought of you's.
Right? So you can adjust that little scoop, that thought of you. It's pretty crazy what you can do with it.
Well, I guess the thought of you's just. Well, I guess the thought of. Well, I guess the thought of you's just.
Now again, if you do it too much, you can start to hear the difference. And so I don't do it too crazy like this. I just ask the guy to sing again.
Well, I guess the thought of you's just fine.
Right? So you can get really crazy with this. I love this plugin.
Well, I guess the thought of you's just fine. Well, I guess the thought of you's just fine. Well, I guess the thought of you's just fine.
Again, this is like super fine tuning. I know a lot of you are probably sitting here like, I don't fucking hear any difference. And yeah, this is like what you're seeing now is just years and years of doing it over and over and over and over and over again, fucking up, doing it again, getting better. Oh shit, fucked up again, gotta get even better. So yeah, this shit takes a long time. Now, obviously, the other way to go about tuning is your guys' favorite, which is auto-tune. Now, I don't have the Antares official one. I have the one from Universal Audio, which is essentially the same. They just licensed the plug into Universal Audio. And I don't know the scale of this song, but in auto-tune, you have this ability to choose the key that your song is in. And then it also has this thing called retune speed, which determines how fast does auto-tune react to the bad note. So a faster retune gives you that super T-Pain vibe, and then a slower one is a lot more natural. And you can enhance the naturalness of the auto-tune by increasing what's called the humanize button. This is it really helps more for when like longer notes, like sustained notes, because sometimes it's harder to keep that dead on. It makes those sound a lot more natural in my experience, right? Obviously, I don't know the key for this, so I'm not even going to try to get that going. All right. So, man, we're going over a lot of plugins. The one plugin that I did pull up before, this little tape emulator.
Well, I can't give you what you need, but I can give you what you want right now.
Like these kinds of plugins I call like the little sprinkles on the top of a track, because they're not your standard EQ, compression, reverb, delay. Like if those are your foundational plugins, things like this are like, you know, I would say these take your mixes from the standard decent good mix to like the pro level oh my god mixes. This particular plugin allows you to emulate the old tape machine days. So if you know anything about tape, that you know that there's 2-inch tape, there's 1/4-inch tape, 1/2-inch tape, and you can even choose over here like what machine type. So I've chosen 2-inch 16 track. You can flip it to 1/2-inch 2 track. You can choose your speed, because you know that like tape machines operate at certain speeds based on their settings. And yeah, it just gives an extra little character to it. Now, this particular setting that I have, this 15 IPS and 2-inch 16 track, I learned from this awesome mix engineer, Adam Nolly Getgood, right? So yeah, it's something about the low end. It really tames out the low end. This particular beat has a pretty wild low end, and we've done a couple of things to tame that out using like multi-bands and EQs and compressors and all that stuff. But the tape machine really allows you to smoothen it out to that final degree, which I really like. I really like that about this plugin. It also seems to tame out some of the harsher high ends too, or add a little bit of that snap without harshness to it. So I like it. Let's do like a before and after. You probably won't be able to hear it, but let's see.
My mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine, babe. So I say too much worse on my...
It also adds this level of warmth to the signal, like warmth in terms of like EQ, right? Okay, so I still haven't gotten anything. Is Bernard not here? Oh, geez. Okay. Hold on. Hold your horses. I'm pretty sure... Oh no, he is here. So I saw an email from you, Bernard. I thought like you didn't get the link, but looks like you did. Guys still alive? All right. Now let's do one last thing. I already taught you about buses, right? Because I'm using these buses. I'm using the buses to send copies of my vocal to the reverb and the delay, right? But let's go into this thing called subgrouping. This is a very important part of any kind of mix. If you have vocals, a bunch of vocals or a bunch of drums or a bunch of, whatever, right? You can actually put them all into what's called a subgroup using the aux method, right? Now, the standard group thing that that I've probably gone over, is that you select multiple tracks, you press Command G, and assign them to like a letter, say the letter A, and if you hit OK, they actually become a group that you can then manipulate all at once, right? You can actually take off the group in this little group section in the bottom left. So take it off, and now they're individual controls. Put them together, and now they're group controls. This also works for editing too, if you have multiple tracks to edit. But what I'm talking about is something called subgrouping, right? Is that if you have all these vocals, you have a vocal, its reverb, and the delay, the typical thing to do is to create a new stereo input called vocal sub. And I always color my subgroups red, just so you know. Again, command click the solo button of all the auxes that you make. Set the input to a free bus, let's say 5 and 6. But this time, instead of sending a copy of the vocal, you're actually going to output the vocal to 5 and 6, as well as the reverb to 5 and 6, and the delay to 5 and 6. So now everything vocal related is going to one subgroup over here, right?
My mind. So
Right?
what of you's just fine.
Now this works. It's interesting to see it set up this way. This is like a basic setup, but it makes a lot more use of the concept when you have multiple vocals. So if I had like harmonies and stuff going on, it would actually make this a lot more, let's say, useful. And maybe there's a way we can actually open that up or get that going. I'll try to do that in a second. But this is basically subgrouping, and it's a very, very, very important part of any mix, right? So you have multiple tracks all routed to the same subgroup. Now, the one thing I want to mention is that these buses, you can lose track of what they're there for. So I always rename the buses wherever they're going. So if it's all going to vocal sub, I rename bus 5 and 6 vocal sub. Bus 1 and 2, I rename vox verb, right? So that there's no confusion as to what these buses do. And you can see that the names are changed everywhere as well. Would you want to send a wet signal to a subgroup aux? Yeah, so that's what I'm doing here, right? I'm sending the dry vocal and the 2 wet signals, all of them to the subgroup. So now everything vocal related is going to one place. And then I can manipulate that how I want. So yeah, absolutely. You can still, individually manipulate with them, but now you have all of them going to one place, and then you can do like this global processing on the vocal subgroup. It's very, very powerful. Let's actually, look, I always do this because like the way I keep shit fun, because look, you're listening to mixes for hours and hours and hours, right? Depending on how fast you are. And the way I at least keep things inspiring and motivating and whatever is that I always do like a before and after. And by the way, the shortcut to bypass plugins is Command and you click on it. But if you press Control and then click on it, it bypasses everything on that track, everything below what you select. So if I select the second one, it bypasses everything below that plugin. But if you do Control Option, it bypasses all the tracks as well as all the plugins on that row and below. So when I do it on the very top plugin, Control Option, click, it bypasses all the plugins. So this is before.
Say too much, what's on my mind, my mind. So I guess the thought of you's just fine.
And that's after.
Just fine, babe. So I say too much, what's
See how much like life we added to this song? Like this is super boring right now. But now,
well, I guess the thought of you's just fine. Just fine.
that's how you fucking make a record, boy. So let's see if we can open up a different session with a couple more tracks. Now the thing is, 44.1. That's what I like. Let's do this. So this is a song. This is actually the song that I told everybody else in the group to go listen to if they wanted something a little bit more advanced. But I just want to open this up just to give you a sense of what a... Okay. Already some of you are like, what the fuck is all this shit? Right, so this is a session. This is a pretty standard session. I don't know how many tracks are in this. I guess you could put that count. There's a way to like show the number of tracks. I obviously never care about the number. I only care about making shit sound good. Oh, track number. Okay, 110 tracks. That's pretty standard, right? And that's including all your kinds of reverb, sends, and delays and stuff. Now, what I want to show you is this concept of grouping vocals. I think somebody, it might have been Ori, was asking about group vocals and how you start to stack them. I just want to give you a small idea of what it can sound like, right? Obviously, this is a little bit more of an advanced session. All right. So let's see what we got here.
I feel it slipping away with the tide and the sound. Turquoise and crimson midst in the mind and the world all around.
All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and save as intro to plugins, so that way I don't mess with anything. I'm gonna get rid of. I really don't want to see or listen to any of this other stuff. So I'm just gonna go ahead and mute these. We don't need these on touch anymore, right? Read. Okay, so let's just focus on the vocals. The vocals are all these blue tracks over here, right? So you can see that I've got individual vocal tracks. I've got some, it's so funny. This is like the exact same signal flow we went through. I got some EQ and some compression going. Wonderful compressor, I might add. And then you have the copies going to the reverbs for some of them and the delays for some others as well. Now I have two sets of reverbs, right? I have one reverb and reverb number 2, depending on which kind of vocal it is, right? Different vocals need different types of reverbs sometime. So your standard vocal or the main vocal sounds like this. I'm going to turn up the volume too, just so that I can hear what the fuck is going on.
I feel it slipping away.
So this is your main vocal without any plugins on it.
I feel it slipping away.
Pretty standard, right? Because it was recorded pretty well, I didn't have to do too much.
I feel it slipping away with the tide and the sound.
Right? But there's also a harmony on top of it, you can see.
I feel it slipping away.
Now, the key to stack vocals is 1 second. Just want to make sure nothing interrupts. Okay, cool. So the key to getting like nice, smooth vocals, there's a couple of layers to it, or a couple of elements to it. The first thing is you want to make sure that the main vocal and the harmony vocal are super locked in time-wise and pitch-wise, right? So you can see that
I feel it slipping away. I feel it slipping away.
so time-wise they're locked in, and pitch-wise you can also hear that they're pretty locked in.
I feel it slipping away.
And for this, the vocalist has to be really good at being able to lock into what they've already done or the other vocal. And, vocals usually don't have they're not like pianos, right? They're like, it's not like, I feel it slipping away, right? They don't like fucking choppy like that. Vocals have like a flow to them. So, I feel it slipping away. All that kind of movement, you have to match it in the harmony. So that's pretty much what he's done, if you think about it.
I feel it slipping away.
Slipping away, right? He's kind of followed all the contours of the vocal. So locking those in is like super, super important. That's the first step. And even if you take off all the fancy effects and everything, it'll still sound tight.
I feel it slipping away.
Right? No effects, no fancy shit, no reverb, no nothing, no compression. He's got it locked in. That's a good vocalist right there. The second thing is adding all these bells and whistles, right? So what I've done is, on the main vocal, I've just taken out some of the mids, added some body to his voice and some top end. But for the harmony, I've done pretty much a similar thing. Now, he recorded this with a different microphone and a different setup, just because of scheduling and stuff. So I had to alter what I did. They're very similar moves, but they are different. Now, the other thing,
With the tide.
if you listen, let's go here.
I feel it slipping away.
Even the compression is very similar.
With the tide.
Now, typically what I would do is I would compress the harmonies a little harder.
I feel it slipping away.
So if you compress something harder, it evens out the signal, right? If you set it to a fast attack. The beauty of that is that you can then push that signal further into the background, but it's still going to be even enough to where you're not going to lose certain words. So, I feel it slipping away, right? If there's a chance of losing, like, I feel it, like if you lose some of the words, it minimizes the impact. But if you compress it to where all the words are a lot more evened out, you can push it into the background a little bit and have it sit right behind the main vocal, which is what I did.
I feel it slipping away.
Right? Pretty cool. This is like kind of the idea when it comes to harmonizing or making, like, you know, multiple vocals do the same or similar performances. Now, the other thing that I want to show you are just these little oohs over here. He does like a couple of harmonies. All right, they're pretty soft, so I'm just going to turn them up for now. Right, so he's pretty much nailed a lot of the contour stuff that I talked about. Now, what I did was, for the EQs, these kinds of background vocals, the vocals that are kind of more, filler, if you will, I have the tendency to take out a lot of the body of those vocals and make them a lot thinner, which might, in your head, you might be like, wait, why would you make something sound thinner? And it kind of goes back to my initial point that I had, which was, well, you have to think of the song in the context of the entire song. People are not going to just listen to these oohs, and I mean like the vast majority. You guys, we're different because we like the nitty bitty ditty shitty details of a track, but most people will just listen to a full song, right? So I'm going to make these thinner so that the main vocals stand out as well as the harmony, but then you can push these little thin vocals right behind that, basically in the back of your head. And you do that by making them a lot thinner so that the emphasis and the body of the vocals is taken away and it's not the priority that the listener is listening to. And they become this kind of more like a blanket thing on top of the vocal. So I take out all that and then compress them pretty hard to where they're very evened out. Right? I could probably do it even more. I'm just going to copy those over. So now they're super evened out. They're pretty thin, right? I could even make them thinner if I wanted to. All right. Just to show you guys an example. This song's already out, so I'm just fucking around with it. So super thin now, but you can still hear the pitch. And now I want to teach you something really cool. If you add reverb, let's say reverb onto these oohs, I'm going to first add the standard Vox 2 reverb. All right, over here. Yeah, now I've grouped these, so that's why we're actually seeing them like this. And I'm going to pan them similar to how I panned it before if you notice, if you're actually paying attention, you'll notice that the panning on the reverb that I'm doing is the exact opposite of the dry. It's a subtle detail, but it's just good to know. So this is where the vocals get to add some reverb, right? Right? So it sounds pretty good. I'm just going to loop this. Right? Sounds good, but I don't want them to be super present with reverb, because if you have the harmonies going on at the same time, they kind of fight for attention. So look, listen to the main vocals, the harmony, and then these oohs.
I feel it slipping away.
Right? So I don't want them that loud. So okay, I could turn them down.
I feel it slipping away.
Which is fine, right? They're softer now.
I feel it slipping away.
So they're softer. That's great. And it's not bad. It's not a terrible mix. But here's where the fucking beauty comes into play. This thing called pre-fader, which I've been kind of hinting at from the beginning of the mod, comes into play really well over here. Right now, these sends are sending a copy of these ooh vocals to the reverb track, but they're sending them post this fader or after this fader. So even if I turn this up and down, it's only going to send a portion of the post fader signal. So if I turn this all the way down, you're not going to hear the oohs. You're not going to hear them. Right? They're gone. However, if I set these faders up to pre-fader and then I turn these down,
I feel it slipping away.
what the fuck? You are hearing only the reverberated signal. And that's what gives you that sense of something's in the background. So if you combine that reverberated signal with a little bit of the dry, that's when you can get some nice background vocals going.
I feel it slipping away. With the tide and the I slipping away. With the
Right?
slipping away. With the
And then if you want to add that final little touch, add some delay on top of that, like I did over here. And then you have beauty.
slipping away. With the tide and the sound. Turquoise and crimson midst in the mind. And the world.
What the fuck? What more do you fucking want, right? Fucking gorgeous vocals. Love this dude. That's my boy right there. Every now and then, because I've been in New York so long, some like fucking Bronx accent will come out like, that's my fucking boy right there. I never sound like that, dude. I'm not that guy. But I've been in New York so long and around studio culture for so long, it's just like somewhere there.
Maybe, oh maybe we'll be just fine. We'll be just fine. Maybe.
Again, all these vocals, super, super tightly recorded. Even if I take off all the fucking effects, they still sound clean.
Maybe, oh maybe we'll be just fine.
Right? He's recorded it wonderfully.
Maybe, oh maybe.
So my job as the engineer is to just make it sound that much better. If you give me a great performance and a great recording, I'll take it to that next level. If you give me a shitty one, you're on your own. Now look, here's another example of how you can use, it's the same thing I showed you for the oohs, but it's done with a couple of different vocals. bet you if I turn off all these, it'd still sound like he nailed it. Right? He just did a great job, and all I did was add a bunch of effects on it and reverbs. And I did that for this because there's like a piano solo going on right now. So I wanted the vocals to be more in the background in this case. But again, it's the same effect. EQ, compression, this pre-fader reverb, and a delay. So this is kind of what I was saying before, where it's like, give me those 4 basic, foundational plugins, and I'm happy. Right? So if you really pay attention, you can actually hear the vocals doing the whoa, right? Just follow these and you'll hear the vocal doing its thing. Right? So again, it's a great way to actually add things in the background of your mix, things that are not super important. Yeah, stack vocals. I fucking love them, man. Yeah, I love just listening to them on their own because they're fucking gorgeous, right? What are these? And then when you combine that with the main vocals, and you have main vocals and oohs and ahs, that's how you really fill out a record. Or boys and crimson myths in the mind, and the world all around. Turquoise and crimson. You can hear it in the back. It's faint, but it's there. Turquoise and crimson myths in the mind, and the world all around. Maybe, oh maybe, we'll be just fine. I remember now that this isn't actually the final mix that got released. This is I did like another. Oh yeah, this is what I did. I remixed this just to like show this last mod how to make a record. But yeah, all these little lines over here is called automation. We'll get into all that stuff. But this is like the level of detail in a mix. So yeah, this is a pretty standard size session, by the way. Let's see what these orchestras sound like. I haven't listened to these in a while. Just gonna mute all the subgroups over here. See what this orchestra's doing. Man, there's nothing like good vocals, right? So like adding all these little touches really gives your mixes not only like the even balanced out level thing, but it gives it like depth and character, and you can fill in all the little gaps in your song. If you want to watch me like mix this entire song, I've done it in another video. Obviously, I'm not going to do that right now. But yeah, I just wanted to give you guys a sense of like how to make things pop, really. And you know what? This is a pretty significantly long video, so why don't we take it back to Zoom for a bit, and we can answer like some questions directly. So I'll see you guys back on Zoom.